Hello Year 8, welcome to Lesson 4 on Tectonics. Today you will need a pen, paper and pencil, and today's lesson is all about living in danger zones and living with risk. Your first activity is our quickfire round, so pause your video here, have a good look at the 5 questions based on the first 3 lessons and see if you can answer them all. So, why live in these risky areas and danger zones? Why do many millions of people live near plate edges, where they're at high risk of earthquakes and eruptions? Why do so many people live at the foot of a volcano? Why do so many people live in San Francisco, where there are loads of earthquakes? So people started to settle in danger zones before we really understood the risks. We didn't really know about Earth's plates until the 1960s. Some of our towns and cities are in danger zones, but they are enormous cities. So Mexico and Tokyo, for example. And if people were to move, where would they all go? And what are the knock-on impacts of that as well? Even after a disaster has happened, most people just want to go home and they hope that another disaster won't happen again. If you've got a good job and a nice life, that might be enough to keep you in a danger zone, even if you do feel a little bit nervous. And you might feel safer knowing that scientists are monitoring volcanoes and are getting better at predicting eruptions, so they can warn you if you need to evacuate or move to safety. Even though they can't predict earthquakes yet, they can design earthquake-proof buildings, bridges and other structures that won't collapse. So over the last couple of lessons where we've been looking at earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, we have heard quite a lot of negative impacts. But there is good news as well. So, good soil. Lava breaks down to give very fertile soil. On Mount Etna in Sicily, the soil gives farmers rich crops of grapes and other fruits. In Java and Japan, they grow rice. You can earn lots of money from tourism. Volcanic areas attract tourists and tourists like to spend money. They flock to visit Mount Etna and Mount Fuji and the volcanoes of Iceland. They can see geysers and relax in hot springs. Geothermal energy, or heat energy that's stored in rock. Water can be pumped down into the hot rocks and it comes back up as steam. And that can be used to heat our homes or drive turbines to make electricity. Over 90% of Iceland's homes are heated in this way. Valuable material. Copper, silver, gold and lead are found in extinct volcanoes. They collect in veins when magma cools and hardens. Sulfur is mined around old volcano vents, and basalt is used to build our roads. And fossil fuels. Plate movements push some of the rock upwards. As it becomes weathered and eroded, it eventually forms sediment on the ocean floor, and the remains of sea creatures that have died and are buried in the sediment, they turn into oil and gas. Plate movement can also lead to vegetation being buried deep in swamps, and in time, slowly, that will turn into coal. Pause the video here. See if you can give 2 economic and 2 social reasons to explain why people live in danger zones. So let's have a little look at a case study. Let's have a look at fold mountains in the Himalayas. The Himalayas are a band of mountains stretching across a few countries, including Nepal, India and China, in the continent of Asia. The Himalayas was formed by a collision zone. People also live there. So 29 Nepalese people live there. Nepal's mountain environment is used in many different ways. What we would like you to do for this activity is to pause the video over the next 3 slides as many times as you like and make yourself a poster about the 3 different benefits of living and working in the Himalayas. Try to include how people use the mountains as well as any problems that they face. Our first benefit is tourism. Nepal is one of the world's poorest countries, and tourism brings in vital money. The country has a rich culture and religious tradition, but the best paying and longest staying tourists travel there because of Mount Everest. Climbing Everest isn't cheap. To even set foot on the mountain, each team of 7 climbers has to pay £50,000 to the Nepalese government. The climbers also provide much needed income for local Nepalese villagers. Some of the Sherpas, a local guide, and if they get to the summit of Everest, they can earn as much as £1,600 for 60 days' work. That's a lot of money in Nepal. Think also of other benefits to local people, of holiday makers and tourists staying in these villages and towns. But tourism isn't always good news. So in the Himalayas, it's destroying the environment. Mount Everest has been described as the highest rubbish dump in the world, covered with discarded equipment and general rubbish left behind by the climbers, tourists and trekkers. Providing precious electricity and water for local people can become really difficult when there are tens of thousands of tourists and climbers demanding access to the same electricity and water. The mountain is now becoming very crowded, with lots of climbers and visitors. And as a result of these problems, there have been calls to restrict access to Mount Everest or even close it temporarily. Remember, you can pause the video as many times as you like so that you can make your poster. Our second benefit is farming. 76% of Nepalese work in farming. It makes up 35% of the country's GDP, gross domestic productivity. Most exports go to India, because in southern Nepal it's easier to transport goods across the border to India than through the mountains of Nepal. Himalayan slopes are steep and soils are thin, so crops are often grown on terraces like you can see in the photo. The farmers here grow rice and vegetables, but also keep cattle, goats and even poultry, chickens. Many farmers are subsistence farmers, which means they only grow enough food for their own families. So lots of the farms are very small and fragmented, which means they're broken up. Increasing the amount of land that is needed for farming has led to major deforestation, and this has caused soil erosion and flooding because the trees are not there to hold the soil together or to soak up excess rainwater. And this in turn threatens the livelihoods of the farmers as well. The Nepalese government are now setting up projects to encourage the production of crops such as tea, ginger and mangoes for exporting and making lots of cash. Our final benefit is hydroelectric power. This is clean and renewable, and Nepal has the potential to generate a huge amount of it. but only 30% of rural Nepalese, that's people that live in the countryside, have electricity, whereas 90% of people that live in towns and cities do have electricity. So exploiting this potential and generating enough electricity to eventually export it to India are seen as really important ways of helping Nepal to become a richer and more developed country. With the help of India and China, Nepal has now developed hydroelectric power projects on the banks of 2 of its rivers. Nepal has got the heavy rainfall over the high mountains. It's also got snow and glaciers that provides meltwater to feed the lakes and reservoirs or the rivers. And that means there's a constant supply of water going through the dams which generate the hydroelectric power. There can be negatives to these schemes and projects though. See if you can think of 2 or 3 different negative ways that this area in the Himalayas may have been affected by building such a big project as the hydroelectric dams. Well done, Year 8. You've now reached the end of Lesson 4, all about living with risk and in danger zones. What we would like you to do now is go back through your videos 1, 2, 3 and 4 as many times as you need, pause in lots of different places so that you learn all of these important facts. Make sure you go back over the 4 facts here on the screen so that you're ready for your quiz next lesson. Well done.